In this video, I will go for aircraft stability, stalls and their effects, then effect of atmospheric conditions, and takeoff and landing problems. Now, first go for aircraft stability. The definition of stability is that stability in aircraft is defined as the property that causes an aircraft, when disturbed from a condition of equilibrium or steady motion, that is in flight, bracket, to develop forces or moments that restore it to the steady condition. That is an airplane that has stability around all axes of flight, that is flying at normal cruising speed and that is trimmed correctly, will fly straight and level flight with no one operating the controls. If the airplane is placed in a turn, climb or dive and then the controls are released, it will return to a state of straight and level flight. Now, in this stability, there are 6 types of stability. Basically, the static stability. The stability of a body rest is called static stability. A rocking chair has static stability because it will return to the same position of rest each time after being caused to rock. At rest, it is in a condition of equilibrium because the sum of all moments and forces acting upon is equal to 0. Now, second one is dynamic stability. The stability of an airplane in flight is called dynamic stability. If the airplane will return to straight and level flight, hands off, after being buffeted by a gust of winds, it is said to have positive dynamic stability. Directional stability. The stability of an airplane about the vertical axis is called directional stability. This means that the airplane will return to a straight level flight path after having been turned, in bracket yawed, one way or the other. Directional stability is dependent upon the proper adjustment of the vertical stabilizer, rudder trim, aileron rigging and the angle of wing setting, in bracket angle of incidence, wash in and wash out. Now, horizontal stability, the fourth one. The stability of an airplane about the lateral axis is horizontal stability. If the airplane is put into a dive or climb and then the control is released, the airplane should return to level flight automatically. If the airplane does not have horizontal stability, it may increase the angle of dive after being placed in a dive, or it may porpoise, that is oscillate through a series of dives and climbs, in bracket pitch up and down, unless controlled by the pilot. Horizontal stability is attained by the correct balance and adjustment of the horizontal stabilizer and elevators or the stabilator if the airplane is so equipped. The angle of incidence of the wing and the location, in bracket fore and aft, of the center of gravity CG are also important factors in horizontal stability. This is why a good understanding of weight and balance of aircraft is essential, together with knowledge of how to load an airplane so the CG remains within the design limits established by the manufacturer. Now, the fifth is lateral stability. Lateral stability is the stability of the airplane about the longitudinal or roll axis. An airplane with lateral stability will maintain level flight laterally, that is, the wings of the aircraft will return automatically to a level position after having been disturbed by a gust or by action of the aileron control. Lateral stability is dependent on correct diagonal of the wing and the angle of sweepback on aircraft having swept wings. Corner rigging of the aileron is also essential to lateral stability. Now, sixth is excessive stability. It is possible to build into an airplane a degree of stability that reduces or makes difficult the control of the aircraft by the pilot. The smooth and easy response of the airplane to its control as operated by the pilot is called controllability. If the airplane does not have the proper degree of this quality, it will be difficult and tiring to fly, particularly through maneuvers. Maneuverability is also an important characteristic of an airplane. This is the ability of an airplane to be directed along a selected flight path by the pilot and to withstand all flight stresses imposed. Now, the next topic is stalls and their effects, in which conditions leading to stall. Earlier we have seen it was pointed out that a stall occurs when the angle of attack becomes so great that the laminar airflow separates from the surface of an airfoil, leaving an area of bubbling that destroys the low pressure area normally existing at the upper surface of a wing in flight. Now I am giving you a figure which illustrates this condition, which also represents the maximum coefficient of lift. When an airplane is in flight, there are a number of flight conditions that may lead to a stall. First, if an airplane is pulled up sharply until its forward speed diminishes to a point where lift is less than gravity, the airplane will begin to lose altitude. The angle of attack increases, and when it reaches the stalling value in bracket about 20 degrees, the wing stalls and the airplane stops flying. If the stall is balanced on both sides of the airplane, it will pitch forward and may soon regain flying speed. In this case, the pilot will usually move the control stick or wheel forward to keep the airplane in a nose down position until flying speed is regained. On most airplanes, the approach to a stall is recognized by stall buffeting or a stall warning device, and the stall can be avoided by releasing pressure on the stick or control wheel. Stalls may occur at high speeds. Stalls occurring under these conditions are called high speed stalls, and they occur when the airplane is pulled up so abruptly that the angle of attack exceeds the stall angle. This stall is not often encountered because under ordinary conditions it is not necessary to pull the airplane up sharply enough to cause a stall. Stalls are more likely to occur during turn and level flight. During turns than in level flight. This is because greater lift is required to maintain level flight in a turn. A pilot must therefore be more alert for stalls in a turn than in level flight. Many accident has occurred shortly after takeoff because the pilot turned the airplane while it was climbing at near stalling speed. Now spins. On earlier planes, one of the immediate effect of a spin was of a stall was a spin. If one of the wings stalled slightly before the other, the stalled wing lost lift and the airplane fell it on that side. In a spin, the stalled wing continues and develop lift and the airplane starts to spin with the stalled wing inside the path of rotation and the flying wing on the outside. With earlier planes, the spin was greatly feared because the design of the airplane was such that the spin was often difficult to neutralize. More recent design include anti-spin characteristic so that it actually requires considerable effort to make the airplane spin. Once flying airplane is made to spin, it can brought out quickly in releasing the control and letting them return to neutral. Now stall warning. Under ordinary conditions of flight, when the pilot is reasonably familiar with the airplane, there is no reason for the airplane to stall. The only time that the airplane approaches the stalling speed is when it is about to land. Sometimes, however, a pilot may not be particularly familiar with the airplane or the load condition of the airplane are not normal, then a pilot might allow the airplane to approach a stalling condition. For these reasons, many airplanes are equipped with stall warning device. Typical of such devices is a small vane mounted near the leading edge of the wing and arranged so that it will actuate a switch when it rises as a result of an excessive angle of attack. The switch causes a warning horn to sound when the angle of attack approaches maximum usual about 5 to 10 knots in bracket 2.57 to 5.14 meter per second above stalling speed. The experienced pilot can usually sense when a stall is about to happen because of the feel of the airplane controls and the reaction of the airplane. Often the airplane will start to shake or buffet because of the flow separation on the wing and the turbulent air buffeting the control surfaces. The control becomes sloppy and do not have the solid feel of normal flight. The effect of flaps or stalling speed must be recognized. When the flaps are down, the stalling speed of a wing is decreased. If an airplane has normal stalling speed of 50 miles per hour, that is in bracket 22.35 meter per second, and a stalling speed of 35 miles per hour in bracket 15.64 meter per second with the flaps down, the flaps must not be raised while it is flying under 50 miles per hour. In such a case, the pilot must know the condition of stalling with flaps either up or down. If flaps are used to take off, the pilot must make sure that flying speed is sufficiently high before raising the flaps. Yes, stall have caused many accidents, usually because the pilot did not exercise sufficient caution or was unfamiliar with the airplane. A good rule to follow is always fly the airplane at speeds well above stalling speed. Now, load factors and safety. Load factor have already been discussed in relation to the forces exerted on the airplane in flight. Load factor may be defined as a ratio between two loads. In the cases discussed, the load factor was given as the ratio between a normal load that is in bracket 1g and higher load developed as a result of maneuvers. The safe load factor for an airplane is designed into it by the design engineers. For example, an airplane may have a designed safe load factor of 4, meaning that the structure has sufficient strength to carry loads 4 times greater than would be imposed under straight and level flight condition in calm air. The operator of an airplane must make sure that an airplane is not flown at speed or under conditions that may apply load exceeding the safe load factor for the airplane. If during flight severe turbulence or any other condition causes excessive loads to be imposed on the airplane, a very thorough inspection must be given all critical structural parts before the airplane is flown again. Damage to the structure is often recognized by bulges or bends in the skin, popped rivets, or deformed structural members. When these are found, the airplane must be grounded until adequate repairs are accomplished. Now, effects of atmospheric conditions. Air temperature. Air temperature is one of the very important factors affecting the flight of an airplane. It has a pronounced effect on the flight of all aircraft, but the pilot of a particular airplane should know how temperature affects the performance of that craft. One of the operations most critically affected by temperature is the takeoff. If an airplane will take off in 500 feet, that is in bracket 152.44 meter at sea level with standard temperature, it will require about 700 feet, that is in bracket 213.41 meter to take off when the temperature is at 110 degree Fahrenheit or 43.33 degrees centigrade. If the airplane is operating from a very short field, this much difference in takeoff distance may be quite important. Air temperature is also a factor in determining true air speed. As temperature rises, the indication of the airspeed indicator decreases. For this reason, if it is necessary to determine exact airspeed, a temperature correction must be applied. This correction can be obtained from a chart or if a flight computer is used, the temperature correction is provided by the computer. Another effect of air temperature is noted in the power output of the engine. Here again, an increase in temperature causes a decrease in engine power. This is because the air is less dense and a similar change is taken into the engine during each intake stroke of a piston. The use of a turbocharger with some engines helps to overcome the effect of increased temperatures by pressurizing the incoming air. Now, air pressure. Atmospheric pressure has an effect upon the flight of an aircraft even more pronounced than air temperature. This pressure varies somewhat owing to weather conditions, and so if it is necessary to obtain a correct barometric pressure reading when one wishes to compute the effect accurately, standard atmospheric pressure at sea level is 14.7 psi or in bracket 101.36 kilopascals, 29.92 inches of mercury, that is in bracket 760 millimeter Hg or 1013.2 millibar. These are all the same pressure but are given in different units. Atmospheric pressure varies with altitude because of the weight of the air above the ground. As altitude above the earth increases, the air pressure decreases rapidly, and at 18,000 feet, that is in bracket 5,487.8 meter, the air pressure is about half the sea level air pressure. At 50,000 feet, in bracket 15,243.9 meter altitude, the air pressure is just a little more than 1/10 sea level air pressure. Because of these changing pressures, a pilot landing or taking off in an airplane at high altitudes must make sure of having correctly estimated or computed the takeoff distance. As an example of the effect that air pressure has upon takeoff distance, we can compare the distance required for the takeoff of an airplane at 10,000 feet, that is in bracket 3048.8 meter altitude, with the takeoff distance required at sea level. A typical airplane which takes off in a distance of 500 feet in bracket 152.44 meter at sea level under standard condition requires about 1500 feet in bracket 457.32 meter at 10,000 feet altitude. It is also important to note that air pressure affects the power of an engine. A normally aspirated in bracket non-supercharged engine will take in only one half the air pressure per stroke of a piston at 18,000 feet altitude that it will at sea level, and the power developed will be one half of that produced at sea level at the same number of revolutions per minute, that is in bracket RPM. The use of turbochargers on engines make it possible for such engines to maintain full rated power at altitudes of more than 20,000 feet in bracket 6,097.56 meter. The pressure and temperature of air together determine density. Therefore, all power and performance charts use air density as a principal factor for computations. Now, takeoff and landing problems. Effect of wind on takeoff. In general, a takeoff should be made into the wind. This is not always possible because a runway may not be exactly in line with the wind. However, it is the practice to use a runway which is most nearly aligned with the wind. The reason for taking off into the wind is that a headwind reduces the amount of runway necessary for takeoff. This can be demonstrated by the following examples. A runway is 21,000 feet, that is in bracket 640 meter in length, and 100 feet in bracket 30.48 meter. From the end of the runway are power lines 50 feet above the ground. An airplane of a certain type fully loaded requires 1000 feet in bracket 304.8 meter to take off in to gain the altitudes of rate of 400 feet per minute in bracket 121.9 meter or 6.6 feet per second, 2 meter per second, while climbing 80 miles per hour in bracket 35.76 meter per second and has 1200 feet, that is in bracket 365.7 meter to travel before it reaches the power lines. At 80 mph, the airplane is traveling about 117 feet per second and so requires 1200 by 116 or 10.3 seconds to reach the power line. Since it is gaining altitude at the rate of 6.6 feet per second for 10.3 seconds, the airplane is at approximately 68 feet in bracket 20.72 meter altitude when it crosses the power lines. This provides about 18 feet in bracket 5.48 meter clearance over the 50 feet in bracket 15.24 meter obstruction. If the same airplane took off with a 10 mile per hour in bracket 4.47 meter per second tailwind, we find that it would be in trouble. With a 10 mile per hour tailwind, the airplane would take about 1241 feet in bracket 378.2 meter of runway before takeoff. This would leave 959 feet in bracket 292.3 meter to go before the obstruction is reached. Also, with the tailwind, the airplane would be traveling at a ground speed in bracket speed of aircraft relative to the ground or 90 mile per hour in bracket 4023 meter per second or 132 feet per second during the climb. It would therefore take it 959 divided by 132 or 7.3 seconds to reach the obstructions. Climbing at the rate of 6.6 feet per second or 7.3 seconds, the airplane would reach an altitude of only 48 feet in bracket 14.6 meters. This of course would not clear the obstruction and the airplane would crash into the power lines. If the airplane in the foregoing example take off into a 10 mile per hour headwind, it requires only about 740 feet of runway before takeoff. This leaves 1452 feet in bracket 442.57 meter to travel before the obstruction is reached. The airplane is now traveling at only 70 mile per hour, that is in bracket 31.29 meter per second ground speed, and so it takes about 14.2 seconds to reach the obstruction. At this speed, it reaches an altitude of about 94 feet in bracket 28.65 meter, and so it clears the obstruction with a wide margin of safety. The effect of wind on ground speed can easily be determined by means of vector diagram. If we draw one vector representing the airplane heading and true air speed and another vector representing the direction from which the wind blows and the speed of the wind, we can form a triangle from which the actual direction and ground speed of the airplane can be determined. This is shown in the figure. The vector AB for the airplane true heading and TS, and the vector BC is for wind direction and speed. (30 knot or 15.42 meter per second from 50 degree. We then draw AC, which represents the actual track and ground speed of the airplane. By measuring, we find that the track of the airplane is approximately 105 degree and the ground speed is about 61 knot in bracket 31.38 meter per second. A crosswind at the time of takeoff may cause considerable trouble unless the pilot understands its effect and makes proper allowances for it. The effect of crosswind is to make the airplane tend to move sideways at the same time that is traveling down the runway. The wind also has a weather vane effect that causes the airplane to try to turn toward the wind. The first correction a pilot must make in taking off with a crosswind is to apply rudder and aileron in a direction that will counteract the weather vane effect of the wind. If the crosswind is from the left, the pilot must apply more right rudder and left aileron than for normal takeoff. The foregoing examples and discussion are given to emphasize the need for extreme care in operation of an airplane. Since the airplane rides on the air, the condition of the air is of prime importance and the pilot must give careful attention to wind and weather if safe flight is to be ensured. Now, effects of wind on landing. Landing in an airplane safely is somewhat more difficult than taking off for most pilots. Hence, conditions on landing are of more concern to the pilot than at any other times during a flight. Before making an approach for a landing, the pilot must determine wind direction and speed in order to use a runway that is most nearly into the wind. On a tower-controlled airport, the tower operator will radio instructions for landing and will also give wind direction and speed. This prepares the pilot to make any correction necessary for crosswind. In a landing on any field, the effect of wind is important, but on short fields or runways, it may be critical. A good headwind directly down the runway toward the landing aircraft has the effect of lengthening the runway. That is, the airplane will require less runway for a landing than it otherwise would, because the ground speed is reduced by an amount equal to the speed of headwind. If an airplane normally lands at 50 knots (25.72 meter per second) TAS, that is true airspeed in calm air, it will land at only 35 knots (18 meter per second) ground speed when landing into a 15 knot (7.71 meter per second) headwind. The wind not only decreases the landing speed but also shortens the landing roll. If it is necessary to make a downward landing, the pilot must use extreme care because the ground speed will be increased and the landing roll will be extended in accordance with the speed of the wind. Crosswind landings are somewhat hazardous depending upon the direction and speed of the crosswind. There are two general methods for making a crosswind landing. The pilot may choose to use either one of a combination of both methods. As the airplane approaches the runway where a crosswind exists, the pilot will immediately notice that the airplane is drifting with respect to the runway. The pilot can then choose to grab the airplane, that is, fly it on heading that will cause it to move straight down the runway but not align with the runway, or choose to put the airplane into a side slip by applying aileron into the wind and rudder to hold the aircraft aligned with the runway. In this way, the airplane can be kept flying down the runway with one wing low. In either method, immediately before the airplane wheels touch down, the pilot will usually align the airplane with the runway and level the wings. Some pilots let the airplane touch down with one wing low and hold this attitude until this crosswind effect is no longer felt. Upon landing, the pilot continues to apply aileron and rudder against the effect of the crosswinds.